Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Road to Decarbonization International Perspectives webinar. I'm Matthew Meyerger, the North American Young Generation Nuclear President, and really excited today. We're joined for perspectives from Canada, America, South America, and Spain. So brought together all these great speakers to provide some updates about where we are on decarbonization, what's happening in these different regions. And without further ado, I will turn it over to the panelists. So the way it's going to work today is we're going to do 4 different presentations. So they'll go through their presentation. If you have questions during this, put them in the chat, or you can wait until all of the presenters are done, and then you can have some screen time as well. I will mention that Virginia does have to drop after 45 minutes. So it'll go Canada and then America. And after America, if you have specific questions, I'd say address it then. You can spend a bit of time there. Then we'll jump over to South America, and then we'll jump to Spain. So I will turn it over to Sarah. Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself and share where you're from?
Sounds good. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name's Sarah Cherrick. I'm the Director of Communications for CANDU Owners Group, and I'm very happy to be here today to talk about all the exciting nuclear developments in Canada. I'll just pull up my presentation and we'll get going. So when you hear the word Renaissance, the first thing that comes to mind might be Beyonce's recent tour, but in Canada, the term is now being used regularly with regards to nuclear. Over the past year or so, there's been a very big pivot from low growth expectations to significant interest and support for nuclear being seen across the country. You can see it in our Prime Minister's words in the quote on the screen here. We're going to need a lot more energy. We're going to have to be doing much more nuclear. It's now recognized that there's no path to net zero without nuclear. As we move to the electrification of transport, vehicles, and other industries, our demands for electricity are increasing rapidly. So to meet our ambitious net zero by 2050 goals, we have strong support from the federal government to find clean energy solutions. This was made clear in Canada's 2023 federal budget, which included nuclear in the Clean Energy Investment Tax Credit. Nuclear was also made eligible for a range of other tax incentives. So what's the forecast for nuclear in Canada? Well, in Ontario, which is already a global nuclear leader when it comes to clean energy and eliminating coal power, we'll need a doubling of nuclear energy by 2050. And in Canada overall, we anticipate we'll need an additional 50 gigawatts by 2050. These new nuclear sources will include both large nuclear units for densely populated areas and industrial parks, as well as SMRs for remote communities and isolated heavy industry. So let's take a closer look at what's happening across the country. We'll start with Ontario and New Brunswick, home to our current operating nuclear fleet. In Ontario, OPG operates Darlington Generating Station, which has produced about 20% of Ontario's electricity since the early 1990s. It's currently in the process of being refurbished, and in July of this year reached a significant milestone. OPG completed refurbishment of Unit 3 and successfully connected it to the grid 169 days ahead of schedule. Once complete, the refurbished Darlington Nuclear Generating Station will provide more than 30 years of power. So with Darlington progressing well, there's also an assessment underway for OPG's other nuclear plant in Pickering. The province has asked OPG to conduct a feasibility assessment on the potential for refurbishing units 5 to 8. OPG is currently undertaking a comprehensive technical examination with the aim to submit a final recommendation to the province by the end of 2023. And learnings from the Darlington project will, of course, be applied to the feasibility assessment for Pickering. OPG is also continuing to advance its Darlington SMR build with the GE Hitachi BWRX 300 technology for up to 4 units, which would total 1,200 megawatts. The planning goal is to complete construction of the first SMR by 2026, with commercial operation beginning in 2029. And a Conference Board of Canada study estimates the construction and operation of 4 SMRs would sustain on average 2,000 jobs per year. Turning to Bruce Power, they supply approximately 30% of Ontario's electricity. They're currently undertaking a major component replacement project that would add approximately 30 to 35 years of operational life to each of the affected units, while other investments will add a combined 30 reactor years of operational life to the units. And in May, Unit 6 was delivered on time and within budget. Concurrently, Bruce Power has undertaken Project 2030, where they're investing $100 million to automate and modernize the plant and aiming to produce another 1,000 megawatts of energy from the site. They've also begun the planning, siting, and environmental assessment work required to add up to 4,800 megawatts of additional nuclear capacity on the site, with community and Indigenous engagement already underway. Looking at New Brunswick, they operate the Point Lepreau Nuclear Generating Station. As they look to the future, they're moving forward on Generation 4 technologies that have reprocessing capability. To this end, on June 30th, they submitted an environmental impact assessment registration document to the Department of Environment and Local Government and a license to prepare site application to Canada's regulator, the CNSC, for an ARC SMR. And last but not least, Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, Canada's national labs, are growing rapidly and increasing their capability to support the significant research and development needs for all of these endeavors. Currently, there's a site revitalization of their Chalk River campus and construction of the $1.2 billion Advanced Nuclear Materials Research Center is advancing. They're also progressing construction of a demonstration micromodular reactor through Global First Power. This project will serve as a model for future nuclear energy projects in remote communities and heavy industry. So let's take a look at the rest of Canada and other provinces that are exploring nuclear. In Saskatchewan, Sask Power, like OPG, has selected the GE Hitachi BWRX-300 small modular reactor technology for potential deployment in Saskatchewan. And they've been awarded $74 million from the federal government to further SMR development. As well, the Saskatchewan Research Council is planning to deploy a series of eVinci microreactors across the province for testing of industrial research and energy use applications. And hot off the presses, as you may be aware, Saskatchewan is the world's second largest producer of uranium. And yesterday, Cameco, one of the largest global providers of uranium fuel based in Saskatchewan, announced the closing of its acquisition of Westinghouse Electric Company in partnership with Brookfield Renewables. So no doubt there will be more news to come from that announcement. In Alberta, Pathways Alliance, which is a group made up of Canada's largest oil sands companies, are working together on responsible development, including achieving the goal of net zero emissions from operations. Their three-phase plan includes the consideration of SMR deployment. And in Quebec, which used to have operating nuclear but doesn't anymore, they are reviewing the potential use of their Gentil 2 site, which ceased operation in 2012, for a new nuclear plant or for potentially SMRs. And in the rest of Canada, really all provinces and territories are considering or looking into nuclear power, whether it's large builds, small builds, or remote off-grid microreactors, and even floating reactors are on the table. So what does this mean? Well, the demand picture is very positive, but success for this level of demand can be challenging. The last CANDU reactor that was built by Canadians was the Qinshan reactor in 2003. So we need to now demonstrate to both the public and taxpayers that we can be successful. And that means on time and on budget. Our performance on refurbishments has been a key to building that confidence. When the industry was first considering plans for refurbishment, one of the highlighted challenges was having overlapping projects at OPG and Bruce Power, where units are in outage and similar resources and skills are needed. There were concerns whether or not we would have the resources. Well, as you can see, we just came out of those first overlapping projects this past summer, and what happened? OPG, 169 days ahead of schedule, and Bruce Power met its timelines. So the lesson here is that collaboration is key. If we work together with a laser focus on our end goal, we can accomplish these big challenges. This gives us a lot of confidence for the road ahead, but of course we still have a ways to go. So this slide just shows you the timelines that I talked about earlier on, with 2028 being the target goal. Obviously, these are all subject to change, but 2028 is the target goal to complete construction of the first GE Hitachi SMR at Darlington. In 28-29, looking to complete the CNL micromodular reactor with Global First Power. In the 2030s, they're hoping to complete the ARC SMR with NB Power, and then we'll continue to support infrastructure growth in Saskatchewan, as well as the ongoing planning work discussed for potential large new build in Ontario. So that brings me to the last part, which is how we're going to get there, and what are the key challenges to delivering new nuclear in Canada? Well, it's not the technology. We have a wealth of expertise in Canada and abroad to tap into, as well as world-class facilities and laboratories to perform research and development. Creating technology that works isn't the problem. And it's also not necessarily the size of the projects. The lessons we've learned from recent projects in other jurisdictions indicate that planning, quality assurance, and vendor management were the challenges. Canadian utilities have had similar challenges in these areas of refurbishment, but as discussed, with subsequent refurbs and through collaboration, they've really managed to improve the process and demonstrate that they can be successful on these large projects. So we just need to keep moving forward. We need to keep getting young people like yourselves interested in working in nuclear. We need to produce more and more graduates. We're not producing them fast enough. And we have to change our mindset from doing what we used to do to doing what works for our needs today. It's really about getting to a fleet approach and not thinking about one unit at a time. And to that end, looking at timelines for approvals that work for a fleet. Can we streamline licensing approvals? How do we create standard designs with minimal changes so that multiple projects can be approved? And we have to collaborate. We all have the same goals: energy security, addressing climate change, and fostering prosperity. We need to keep working together to achieve those goals. The supply chain, academia, government, we all need to work together. The Baraka plant in the UAE was a demonstrated success, and this came from the UAE working closely with its South Korean partners. There are even Canadians in there at the project management level that were really modeling that Team Canada approach. And the government provided financial support and took on the risk of this first-of-a-kind project. So it just demonstrates that collaboration really is key. So to wrap up, I'll just note that CANDU Owners Group was recently part of the IAEA General Conference and Roadmaps to New Nuclear Events in Europe. And something that was noted by our international counterparts was that when it comes to nuclear, Canada isn't just talking, we're doing. So we just have to keep doing. So I guess with that, I'll stop talking and turn it back to Matthew. Thanks.
Thank you. And as a Canadian, super excited for all the developments we have. So thank you, Sarah. Again, if anyone has specific questions, you can throw it in the chat, but we will save the questions until the end. So now I will turn it over to Virginia to give an update from the Americans.
Thank you, Matthew. And thank you, Sarah. That was really helpful. I think there's a lot of similarities with the United States. So I think this will be a seamless transition to what we're talking about here with the United States state of the industry. So I wanted to give a little bit of my background so that you all understand the perspective that I'm coming from. I'm with the Nuclear Energy Institute. I'm one of the directors on their federal programs team. And before I worked at NEI, I worked in the United States Congress. I worked for a senator and for a member of the House of Representatives. So I'm really coming at this perspective from a policy government perspective. I was working on Capitol Hill for a member of Congress who was a former nuclear Navy surface warfare officer. And she was a very strong advocate for nuclear energy because she operated nuclear reactors for the nuclear Navy. And as I worked for her, I started to realize how essential nuclear energy was for meeting our climate goals, for national security, and for providing reliable baseload, affordable power for the United States. So with that, let me share my screen and we can get started. 1 second here. All right. So I want to set the stage, the federal stage first, and then we'll move to state policy. So us at NEI are very pleased with how the tone we are seeing in the United States Congress towards nuclear energy. There is very strong bipartisan support. Both Democrats and Republicans are really supporting nuclear energy policy, and that's incredibly unique right now in a time where our political atmosphere is very polarized. It has been hard to find issues that both Democrats and Republicans come to the table and work on together over the last few years. But nuclear is one of them. We're really excited about that. I'm going to give you a couple examples on where we're seeing this bipartisan support to encourage you, because we're really encouraged by it. So the first example is in the House of Representatives. The House Energy and Commerce Committee on Energy, their subcommittee on energy, passed 12 nuclear bills unanimously. Unanimously is a really big deal. It essentially means that there was no opposition from any member of Congress. Both Republicans and Democrats were supportive, and they didn't even need to take a tally of this many people supported these bills and this many people opposed. Everyone supported. So that was a huge win. It ranged from a variety of topics such as nuclear workforce, nuclear fuel security, and nuclear regulatory reform. We also heard members of Congress during this markup say and tout that these were some of the only bills that the committee was working on and able to move in a bipartisan fashion. So that was a really big win. We were really excited about that and the outcome of that subcommittee markup. Not only are we seeing bipartisan support in the House, but we're also seeing strong bipartisan support in the Senate. So a couple months ago this summer, in their large annual defense bill, the Senate passed an amendment on the nuclear fuel security. I want to explain that a little bit more. It's the amendment essentially would create a nuclear fuel supply program at DOE in order to help us get off reliance on Russian fuel. And this amendment passed the Senate 96-3. So 96 senators supported and only 3 senators opposed. To give you some context, I'm sure you all know this, but there are 100 senators in the United States Senate. So 96 supported. We were incredibly excited about that. That was better than we thought going in. And so we're really proud of the United States Senate senators that stood up and supported. And we believe this sent a strong message to other individuals in the government and the American public that elected officials believe nuclear energy is essential to national security. Because again, like I said, this was part of a national security bill. So we were really proud. We were really excited about the message that that sent. The other thing is that we're seeing strong support from the Biden administration, which is a Democratic administration. We have Dr. Katie Huff, who is running the Office of Nuclear Energy, and she has been incredibly supportive of advocating for funding for the nuclear fuel supply program and for other programs at DOE that affect nuclear energy. So we're really grateful. We're sitting in a really good space in the federal arena. So I'm going to move to state policy. Like I said, I handle federal policy, so this isn't my area of expertise, but our state policy director did give me these slides, and she's relayed this information to me. If you have further questions on the state policy side, I'm happy to connect you with her, Christine Cheesmadia. She's really great. She's very active, and she would definitely be able to answer your questions. But I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview on the state policy. First, I want to show you this map, which I think is really cool. It really, I think, sums up the state of where state policy is in the United States. As you can see, the green shows state action or stakeholder interest in advanced nuclear reactors. The blue shows planned or seriously considered projects for advanced reactors. And then orange is under construction, which I'm sure we're all aware of. That's Vogtle in Georgia. I think this graphic really says it all. This is the majority of the United States that's colored. It shows how many states are interested, are pursuing advanced reactors. I think if you talk to Christine, who has worked in state nuclear policy for a long time, she would say that this is a big change from a decade or 2 decades ago. And she would also say that 5 years ago, she was excited to see about 15 bills in state legislatures being considered on nuclear policy. And this year, she has tracked over 200 bills in various states that touch on and impact nuclear. That is a astronomical increase. We are so excited. A lot of it is due to the hard work she's doing with people like you and your companies, but that is a huge increase in interest within the states. This is a list of some of the bills that or topics that state policy is touching on. As you can see, it's a wide variety: fusion, hydrogen, workforce. But I wanted to talk about the nuclear moratorium repeals. So I'm sure you all are aware of, in the 1980s, there was this strong anti-nuclear environmental movement. And that brought about a number of states to put on the books nuclear moratoriums. And that prohibited the state from building any new nuclear power plants. So now, current day, lawmakers are realizing they're doing the math. This isn't going to work if we're trying to meet our carbon goals. We have to have nuclear energy to decrease our carbon emissions by X date. We can't just rely on renewables, wind and solar. And so we're seeing a number of states fighting to repeal these nuclear moratoriums. I'll give you a couple examples. So in West Virginia has specifically become interested in transition some of their coal communities to nuclear communities. As you all are probably well aware, there's a lot of similar skills. There's a similar workforce that could easily be transferred to nuclear workforce. And so in 2022, the West Virginia state legislature repealed their nuclear moratorium, which was really great. That was awesome news for us. A less happy ending, but still promising, was the example of Illinois. The state legislature in Illinois, in a bipartisan fashion, passed a bill to repeal their nuclear moratorium. And kind of out of the blue, the governor vetoed the bill. This was really discouraging because he had signaled support for repealing the moratorium previously. And we were really confused, really discouraged. However, we do still see some light at the end of the tunnel, because they're, like I said, strong bipartisan support. Both Republicans and Democrats supported repealing the moratorium. Also, the governor received a lot of backlash from a wide variety of stakeholders. And so we see that there might be a path forward in still repealing. There just may need to be some tweaks. So these are two examples of state policy trends that we're seeing some good, really promising movement for nuclear. And again, some of those federal examples also are very promising. So what's ahead? How can you all help? Well, some key issues that we see for the nuclear industry is continued education for decision makers. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard some of the misinformation or catchy phrases against different things with nuclear, such as used fuel. And you all know the truth. We need to start educating our decision makers, the American public, on the truth about used fuel, such as every energy source has some sort of waste. And the nuclear industry has had incredible track record of safety in containing and storing our nuclear waste. So people like you need to educate these decision makers, and people like NEI, we are working to educate the decision makers and dispelling some of those myths about nuclear energy. Also, I think Sarah touched on this, we need to grow our nuclear workforce. I think all know that you guys are the backbone of the future of our industry. You all are incredibly talented, young, vibrant employees. But I'm sure you've had conversations with your bosses and with the people that are ahead of you in their career in the nuclear industry that this is an aging workforce. And to meet the growing energy demand, we need more people in the workforce. And so I hope you all are loving what you do. So go out there and tell your family, your friends, your neighbors about how great it is to work in the nuclear industry, how you're really impacting your communities, your country, the globe. There's a really great argument to be had for people to join, that you're making a difference. And so I don't think there's anyone better to talk about it than you all. And then of course there is advocacy. I'm sure you all have heard of our advocacy arm at NEI, Nuclear Matters. You might have actually already joined, but I'm gonna put a shameless plug in for it anyways. So Nuclear Matters, as I said, is our advocacy arm. It helps the people who are educated and passionate about nuclear. It really mobilizes them to start impacting policy and impacting decision makers in the most effective way possible. You can get alerts on policies that we need to advocate for in order to improve or benefit the nuclear industry. And my colleague who leads that effort is actually, I believe, on the call. Her name's Kay. And so if you have questions, you can reach out to her too. You can scan here to join Nuclear Matters or text. But that's a really important way that we can continue to improve the atmosphere for nuclear policy. And so to summarize, I think what I see and what NEI sees is that there is a ripe atmosphere for the nuclear industry in state and federal policy. And now our responsibility is to rise to the occasion and to show the American public how essential the nuclear industry is to every American's well-being. So with that, I can take questions because I am going to have to hop off. I have to go to chat with some congressional staffers. So that's what I have to do almost every day, but I'm happy to take some questions. Let me stop sharing my screen here, if I can figure that out.
Thank you, Virginia. And just so everyone's aware as well, NEI and NAYGN, we do have an MOU, so we do work together on workforce retention issues. We work with Nuclear Matters. As we can see, everyone's on this cohesive path to address everything and make everything better. So we're all working together here. So I do see a question, so I will ask it from the chat here, Virginia. So I'll read this. It says, while I understand the topic of advanced nuclear trends are very positive, what are the generic sentiments within the nuclear policy making bodies for the completion of previously abandoned nuclear projects or the restart of reactors retired in the recent past?
So I think I can answer this question. Maybe Christine would be better to chat with about this, but what I feel like I sense, I think, advanced reactors are really promising. We're seeing a lot of interest, but I think where some people are hesitant is the cost. I think another thing is people are concerned about the slow regulatory process. I think those are the biggest concerns that I have heard. While people are like, yes, I get that this is really promising, we're interested, but how long is it going to take with licensing at the NRC? Or how expensive is it going to be? What are the cost overruns? And I know those are the concerns that I have heard most. Does that answer the question?
I think it does, yeah. And I think also from the Vogtle experience, there is some reluctance for these major projects. So I think maybe it's going to be successfully doing some of the SMRs and some of the conversions that's going to restore the public faith as well. So,
Yes.
It's starting a bit smaller and then go to those, the larger ones again. Another one here as well is, what do you think are the main contributors to the House and Senate being supportive at this time, considering the negative perceptions in the last few decades? And does this include public support of their constituents? Yeah. That's
a great question. And I have been trying to understand the answer to that because I feel like it's a big change. What I would say, this is all speculation in my opinion, but I would say that the older generation, specifically of Democrats, were very impacted by that environmentalist anti-nuclear movement in the 70s and 80s. Specifically, they were really impacted by Chernobyl, by 3 Mile Island. And we have a new generation of, I would say, more progressive, liberal young people that almost like you could talk to a lot of people about this in Gen Z, and they would say one of their number one concerns is climate change. And so I think that generation doesn't have the scary experience of 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl that they makes them immediately say no nuclear. I think they see the math, they see the facts, and they haven't seen a serious accident, and they want climate change addressed, and they're doing the math, and they realize that renewables isn't the only way. I think we have a lot of really good, like, we have really good PR with like Grace Stanke, that is Miss America. Like, I think she's making a huge impact in the young people. We have like Isodope, who is like dispelling a lot of myths. So I think PR has gotten better. And then I think that just a new generation has become more open to it because they didn't have that historical anti-nuclear environmentalist movement that maybe gave them kind of a knee-jerk reaction. I think they're more open to it. So that's what I would say I see. Matthew, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, like I said, even going to climate conferences, like you see all these young generations, all these influencers, we're starting to get out there and not hide in the shadows anymore. And I'm also seeing case studies. So we see what Germany has tried, we see what California has tried, we see what New York has done, and we see where that gets them. So other senators, other members of the House are looking at this and saying, okay, if our state is looking at decarbonizing by X date, we need to have nuclear. So I will ask one final question and then we'll pop over to Alice. So one final question is, have you heard any updates about the support for developing high-level waste or spent fuel repositories? So probably a reference to Yucca Mountain.
Yeah. Oh my, that is a really tough one when you're in politics. I think a lot of people in the industry see it as a simple answer because, you know, the science is there, but everyone that I talk to says this isn't like a scientific or technological problem. This is a political problem. And so it's just so hard to get members of Congress to agree on this because they are really nervous about the optics. They're really nervous about what their constituents will think. Even if we can say, here are the facts, it's safe, this is like the best place to put it, the politicians just, they can't bring themselves to support it if it's going to be in their backyard. So I have heard that there is some talk on the Senate side of doing a bill that would address waste. I don't think it will be a bill that is the end all be all solution. I think it's going to be baby steps like consent-based siting. But I hear that some people are interested in taking baby steps to address the waste problem. But again, it's a political problem, not a technological or geological problem. And so when politics gets involved, it's incredibly hard to have a solution.
And I will say this is a great example of where the US Department of Energy and Canada's Nuclear Waste Management Organization have signed just earlier this year, like a statement of intent to cooperate on used fuel nuclear management. So the DOE is going through consent-based siting process. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization up here in Canada, we've been doing this for just over 20 years. So again, sharing best practices, working together, I think, to get that moving forward. So yeah, I think it's a long process. We don't want to rush it, but it is moving forward. And especially with some of the other reactor designs out there like TerraPower, maybe we can use spent fuel for even better purposes. So yeah, Virginia, I want to thank you for joining. I know you have to hop off. So again, if we don't answer all of your questions, just keep putting them in the chat. I'll send it to her after. And I will flip it over to Alice for an overview of South America.
Hello, everyone. So my presentation is going to be a little bit different because I'm sure as you are from NYGN, you are very familiar with the energy matrix in Canada and US. So I just wanted to go back a little bit to the basics when talking about this region of South America. And I'll focus mainly on Brazil and Argentina because those are the only two countries in South America that have the presence of nuclear power. But before, just to introduce myself, I'm Innovation Project Lead at Westinghouse. I'm Brazilian, but I'm currently living in Europe. I'm a nuclear engineer as a background, and I have been involved with NYGN actually through Westinghouse and other activities. And right now I'm the professional development chair for IONC. So just keep on the lookout also for the professional development program that IONC is launching that you guys will be able to apply and participate. So talking about the region of South America. So South America is responsible today for around 6% only of the greenhouse gases emission globally. And the dependence of the region in South America of fossil fuels is around 40%. And there was a report that was released earlier this year that was 39% of the whole region dependent on fossil fuels. So comparing to other particular countries is a region that has a little bit lower dependence on fossil fuels. But there is countries specific that are even less dependent. So Brazil is a very green country. The majority of the energy matrix is renewable energy. So I'll share my screen and I'll go over a little bit about the matrix in Brazil and in Argentina. Just see here. Here we go. Okay. So it is in Portuguese because I wanted to get the latest one. So the blue and that has a drop is hydraulic. So Brazil energy matrix, electricity matrix, sorry, this is the electricity matrix, is basically the majority is hydro. We have more than 1,000 hydropower plants in the whole country. And Brazil is the 50th largest country in land-wise. So it's as US and Canada is a very big country. And we have around 210, 212 million people as a population of the country. Nuclear right now in Brazil is around 2% only. We only have 2 power plants, 2 reactors in operation in one power plant in Brazil. And wind and solar are growing very, very, very rapidly in Brazil, especially wind in the northeast of the country, which has a lot of potential for wind power. We also have a gas increase because of the fast build and also as being used as a transition energy. And Brazil has committed to net zero to 2050 as well as Argentina. The other countries in South America, they don't have nuclear programs, nuclear power programs. They have nuclear medicine applications and so on programs. Bolivia is the most recent one to have joined nuclear medicine programs, but they currently don't have neither plans for. There is discussions in some countries around South America for new plants, but not anything very feasible as of right now. So Brazil and Argentina are the only 2 countries that have been focused on nuclear. They have nuclear and have focused on actual new nuclear in their future. So right now, Brazil has only 2 reactors, as I said, Angra 1 and Angra 2. And Angra 3 is under construction. Angra 1 is Westinghouse design, PWR, and Angra 2 also a PWR, pressurized water reactor design, but from a German design from back in the 70s when Germany was still into nuclear and did a government-to-government agreement to transfer technology. Brazil is also have a lot of uranium. So is in the top 10 of the largest uranium reserves in the world. And that is with only 1/3 of the territory being searched. So there is a lot of uranium that we still don't know where in Brazil, because that search, that investigation was done decades ago. And so the amounts that we are aware put Brazil already in the top 10. And Brazil also has the technology of mining and enriching and manufacturing its own fuel. So even though we work together with other countries to support when, of course, minings are not operational for licensing because they are selecting another site for licensing, so they needed to rely, of course, on other countries. But currently, we have the enrichment and fuel manufacturing capabilities. The utility is called Electronuclear and is responsible for the operation of the 2 plants and the construction of the 3rd plant, which is a sister plant to NAYGN 2. So it's also a German PWR design. Brazil also has capability of heavy equipment manufacturing, which is NUCLEP. And we are currently on the process of splitting the commission and regulatory body, which many countries have gone several years ago. Brazil is undergoing the past couple of years splitting CNEYGN, which was the former regulatory body and also responsible for research. And now it's going to be only research, and the agency for nuclear security in Brazil is going to be just the regulatory body. And I know this was done by US and other countries many, many years ago, and that's what it's undergoing right now. For new plants planned besides NAYGN 3, there was the release 2 or 3 years ago of a 2050 plan for expansion of energy plans of the country. So every few years, there is a company in Brazil that does energy planning and evaluates the demand in the next 10 years or the demand in a much larger time frame. And in this larger time frame, they evaluated the demand and they created scenarios that would require the expansion of the nuclear program in Brazil. So that is something that was simulated and evaluated as a necessity. Of course, is very heavily dependent on government decision. So we have a new government as of this year with elections that we had last year. And this new government has been very focused on deforestation, as we had increase in deforestation in the past years. So nuclear has not been necessarily at the forefront of their climate actions at this year. We hope that changes as we go forward. But NAYGN 3 construction has continued. So it is a plant that has stopped construction several times, which I know people that have lived through Watts-Bar in the US also are familiar with that process. But it has restarted finally, and we hope before the end of this decade, it's finalized, the construction. It's around 1,400 megawatts of power. In the case of Argentina is much more dependent on thermal power. This is a matrix of September 2021, but it's very reflective of the 2021 year. I couldn't find proper numbers for 2022, but it's similar. So they have hydro, but they are much more dependent than Brazil in the fossil fuels. And they have 3 power plants operational that currently are around 7% of their electricity matrix. They also have 2050 net zero plans, and they are undergoing elections as of this moment. The second phase of their presidential elections is in November 19, if I'm not mistaken. And there's 2 very different candidates in the ballots that will be hard to tell now what is the climate plans before we understand who won, because in South America, those, as everywhere in the world, the climate and nuclear is very heavily dependent on governmental decisions. So we need to wait a little bit to understand what's going to happen. But to understand what currently have in Argentina, they have a very well-developed nuclear industry. 3 reactors. One is a CANDU reactor, which is in Bausi, and Atucha 1 and 2 are also heavy water reactors, but they are German designs. They have the cutting reactor in construction, which is a SMR, is completely national technology. So they are developing themselves. That SMR it's being developed close to one of the sites that they already have. They also are responsible for exporting nuclear research reactors. So the Opal reactor at Anston in Australia, for example, is their design. They are working on the Palace in the Netherlands. So they have been exporting technology as well on the research side. And they manufacture fuel. They don't need enrichment because they use natural uranium, although they sometimes enrich from 0.7 to 0.85 to have a little bit more efficiency, and they use the Brazilian capabilities of enrichment. So there is agreements to do that, to have a little bit more efficiency on their reactors. But as you know, heavy water reactors don't use enriched uranium. They also have equipment manufacturing capabilities. So for their new reactor plants, as in Brazil, they are able to manufacture their own heavy equipment, which shows a strong supply chain. But of course, it's tough to maintain these capabilities as we don't have other new plants projects. So those companies in Brazil and in Argentina have gone to work also in other industries to make sure they maintain workforce and quality and capabilities while new plant projects are not coming. Argentina had signed a Chinese agreement, so a government agreement with China for a new plant, which would be the Hualong 1, is a PWR. And they had signed this agreement, they had signed contract, but it has not started yet. And to be honest, we're not so sure when that project would start, but it's on a planned new plant, which would be the Hualong design, which is a new design for the Argentinian CCs. They are used to heavy water reactors, and this would be a PWR. And again, they are much more heavily dependent on fossil fuels, but they also have 2050 net zero plans to focus on reducing their emissions. One thing that I think is important to highlight for the region is there is going to be a lot of focus in this region in the next couple of years because major events there are coming on the climate topics will be coming to Brazil. So next year, Clean Energy Ministerial will be hosted by Brazil, as Brazil is going to be in the presidency of G20. And in 2025, COP30 will also be hosted by Brazil in the Amazon region. And that was already announced by Brazilian government. We, of course, are we are waiting the announcement formal from COP, but that the Brazilian government already announced that the UNFCCC approved the application. So it is just to keep that in mind that there is going to be a lot of focus in that region for that. And I'm going to stop sharing. And before I move on to other people, of course, to Alex, I think is the next. I just want to say that I like how Sarah and Virginia mentioned what should we focus, what are recommendations and the needs. It's very similar everywhere when we talk about workforce development and the need to new workforce. But I want to emphasize also the need for us to work on innovation and new technologies, and if ways to decrease the costs of the reactors that we are building. The region like South America still needs very large reactors as well to maintain the not only the decrease the carbon emissions, but also to bring development. So when we talk about energy transition, just energy, climate justice, and so on, it's important for us to take into consideration that energy brings development, and this region needs a lot of development yet. So SMRs and large reactors will be needed. But of course, financing is an issue for the region, especially when we bring technologies from other countries such as US and Canada that have a different currency and so on, and export taxes and so on. So as we, as an industry, work together to make these technologies safe and cheaper in terms of efficiencies in construction, decreasing the amount of materials, and so on. These also allow that those regions have better access to the technologies that will bring development to the people there. So yeah, I just want to motivate everybody that is working to focus also on bringing innovations and to improve life everywhere.
Well, thank you, Alice. And I know it's tough to cover an entire continent in
Yeah.
10 or 15 minutes here. So I will next turn it over to Alex. And just for those that aren't aware, NAYGN is just one of the young generations around the world. There's over 50. So really happy to have my Spanish counterpart here joining us from Spain. So Alex, you have the floor. And I think you might be muted, Alex. There we go. Let's see.
Hello, everyone. Can you see
Yeah,
me?
yeah, we can hear you and see you. You've got the floor.
Okay, great. Yeah, I will share my screen. I've had to log in twice so I can share my screen. So let me see. Please confirm when you can see it, Matt. Oh, wait. I've had to log in with another computer. Give me a second.
And while Alex is getting this going, just continue to put your questions in the chat. We'll see if we have time at the end. We may run a little bit over, so we'll try and address those at the end as well.
Okay, I will have to leave the webinar and start again. Give me a second. I've logged out with one of my, I didn't have the permissions, but I'll start by presenting myself while the WebEx is restarting on my computer. I'm Alex Carrasco, so my full name is Alejandro from Spain, and internationally I go by Alex, and also many of my friends refer to me in Spain as Alex. So I'm the president of the equivalent of NAYGN in Spain. So we're called Jóvenes Nucleares. And yeah, I met Matt a couple of years ago in Tarragona in some of the international congresses that we have for the nuclear industry. So he came over to Spain for a congress that we organized, and it's great we have continued to collaborate with NAYGN since then, and it's great to continue actively collaborating with you guys. So I'm here to give a bit of an overview of the Spanish nuclear sector. I've also recently started working in an American company, so glad to in Westinghouse in Madrid with Alice. So I'm glad to be here and to explain how the Spanish nuclear sector works to NAYGN. So yeah, I'll see if I can share my screen. Let me see for a second. Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm rejoining. There you can see me twice and sharing my screen. Okay, please confirm when you can see it. Okay.
Yep, yeah, we got it.
Great. Okay, guys, so I'll try to be brief, but Matt, be sure to interrupt me if I'm going over time by a lot. I'll put in a chronometer so I don't go off by a lot. So I've prepared a small overview of the activities in Spain, and first I wanted to start by presenting my association. So just very briefly, what do we do in JJNN, Jóvenes Nucleares? We are NAYGN's equivalent at the level of Spain. So these are our objectives. We have very similar objectives, and we depend on our mother society, that is the Sociedad Nuclear Española. And our objectives are to facilitate the integration of young professionals, to encourage communication between the generations, and the third one, which I'd say is probably the most important one, which is to spread awareness about nuclear energy and its various applications, emphasizing the crucial role the industry plays in our society's well-being. So now for the overview of the Spanish nuclear sector. I've decided to start first with a small situation of Spain. So I imagine you guys from the US, you've maybe traveled to Spain, maybe traveled to Europe, but I wanted to give a small overview of where we're at and where the country's at in more general terms. So this is, for example, a situation of where where Spain is with respect to other countries that generate nuclear energy. So we've got 7 reactors, as you can see here in the small diagram, and we are placed, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14th by generation in percentage of nuclear energy. So we have 20% of our energy that comes from nuclear. So out of the 422 reactors in operation in the world, 7 are in Spain. And this is a small overview of also Europe, because we're also part of a continent, as Alice was explaining for South America. So I wanted to also give a small overview of the nuclear situation in Europe. You all know that the country with the most percentage of nuclear is France, which is the first one here, which is also European. They're right next to Spain, and we have 104 nuclear reactors in Europe, and in the global European energy mix, this accounts for 25% of the total electricity production. And other interesting data, 50% of the total electricity with no CO2 emissions, 1 million professional jobs in the European Union. This is super interesting for me. And 100 million euros per year in GDP associated to nuclear energy. So one of our like lemmas in Jóvenes Nucleares that you'll see at the bottom of the screen here is derribando mitos, which means we are the myth busters for nuclear energy. So if some of my colleagues would see me that I'm presenting this, they wouldn't be very happy, because we sometimes in Spain we get very associated to these kind of images, and we don't love that, because this is things that are very traditional, and everyone talks a lot about them, but it's sometimes a bit of a myth, no? So this doesn't fit very well with these letters here, but we're the Mythbusters for nuclear energy. So I did want to include some of the context of the country, especially the population, which I think is very important, because when I'm talking of 20% of nuclear energy, this has to be given some context. So we do have a 46.7 million population. And what does the electricity mix look like in Spain? Well, this is an evolution of how the electricity mix has been changing throughout the years. And as you see here in orange, we have nuclear energy. So nuclear has been very stable since the 1990s, which we'll discuss afterwards. And we've seen a rise in fossil fuels until the year 2008, 2009, and a decrease after that year, compensated by global rise in renewables, and nuclear energy has been stable until 2020, nuclear energy production. And we've also seen a chink here in the global energy consumption. This is due to the crisis of 2009, and until 2020 it was still going down. Also due to energetic improvements, no? So things are consuming less and less, so we can have the same population with less energetic consumption. And this is the full energetic mix of 2020 of Spain. So we have around 20% nuclear. We'll see this later in more detail. Around 20% wind, and between 20 and 30% of gas. Okay, those are our main sources of electricity. And this is how the current situation of nuclear energy in Spain looks. So the important parts of this graph are the 7 nuclear power plants that are in pink. So these are the active nuclear power plants, these 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. 3 of them located in Catalonia in the northern region, and one very near to Madrid, Castilla-La Mancha, with Cofrentes also, and Almaraz 1 and 2 in Extremadura. And you can see here that we have also 3 green power plants that have already been dismantled or are in the process of dismantling. Vandellós 1, Zorita, and Garoña, which is the last one. If you look closely, you can see that the build year was 1970 for Garoña. We started dismantling this one only a couple of years ago. And also something very interesting about Spain is that we have a lot of nuclear power plants that are yellow here in this map. And this is linked to the moratorium imposed on nuclear energy, 1984. So we finished the dictatorship of Franco ended in 1975 in Spain, and we started with democracy. And shortly after, there were a lot of projects of nuclear power plants that were projected to be built, which are all the yellow ones in this map, that got stopped by the Spanish government. So this is what we called, and I wanted also to mention this because I know the American speaker mentioned also about the nuclear moratorium in some of your states. Well, we also had a nuclear moratorium in Spain. And the current situation for the Spanish power plants, as I think many of you will know, is a phase out. So here you have, this is in Spanish, but these are the 7 nuclear power plants that we were showing before. And here you have the dates of that they are planned to stop operation. So we see 2027, 2028 for both Almaraz plants, the one that we're seeing to the left in the map that we saw before, 2030, 31, 34, and by 35 we would have phased out all of the nuclear power plants. This is something that is still current, and it's reevaluated every time we have a government change. This current moratorium was proposed or was also included in the last plan that our current government the last plan that our current government pushed. So this is the actual situation in Spain, and we're hoping that this may change for some or all of these plans. So as we'll see later, we are doing a lot of activities to try to change the moratorium of Almaraz 1 and 2, the phase out of these nuclear power plants, which would start as planned in 2027. So some other quick data from Spain: 20% of the electricity production, 7 nuclear reactors, as we've seen. And this is a very important part, I think. Although we have a phase out and we don't have a situation that's as promising as some other countries, I think it's very impressive when people come to a congress, for example, in Spain, like Matt did, and when you see, hey, I thought the situation in Spain was very bad and you guys had a phase out. Well, actually, we have a very, very big nuclear industry that got started in the 1970s with our power plants. And actually, 70% of industrial nuclear activity in Spain is dedicated to exports. So even if we do have phase out, the nuclear industry in Spain is hard and pushing harder. We create 8,500 direct jobs, 3.5 productivity is 3.5 times greater than the Spanish average. 80% of employees have indefinite contracts, 50% of employment has university degrees, and the nuclear industry provides jobs to over 28,500 people in Spain. We've got also, as Alice was presenting previously for South America, a large part of the nuclear fuel cycle included in Spain, from fuel manufacturing and supply to waste management and dismantling. And of course, the nuclear power plants that I presented before. So I'm going to check to see how I'm doing on time, running a bit low, but I wanted to present after this phase out what we are doing currently from Jóvenes Nucleares. So these are some of the activities that we've done last year, and these in the last 6 months from February to September. I couldn't update this before the presentation, so this is from the last one that I gave at the end of September. And we've reached 2,000 people in many different kinds of activities, and it brings up the number to about 2.6 activities per month. So what do we do? This is an impact of the different kind of activities in Spain and some also internationally. As you see, we also have done some courses in the US, because we have some of our ex-members that have been displaced over there, and they are still giving some courses over there to Spanish companies there. So we are 14 people in the board of directors, and we have 70 plus collaborators and more than 1,500 members. Some of the work that you may have seen from our association is with social media. We have very good numbers in social media, and we collaborate actively with NAYGN and our American and European counterparts. And we have a very strict process of revision. I can maybe go into more detail if someone is interested in this. We've also talked long and hard about this with Matt, and how we each do the different how each of our associations does the multimedia and the general social networks and communications. So this process is, I think, a core part of how we do this. Especially, I think it's really interesting the first part, where every single member of Jóvenes Nucleares can come up with an idea and push it through this process. And we have teams that do independent technical and multimedia revisions, and then each channel has its own community manager, which helps for that person to have ownership of the channel. We have a big team that's collaborating in communications. And some of our other activities, I will just show some pictures here. We give courses in universities to companies also. And this is where I wanted to get to. We do a lot of these pictures are all from since February, actually. So we do a lot of different activities and try to attack this try to attack this problem of the phase out in the Spanish nuclear sector, and try to especially transmit information to the public, so they know at least a position that's based on science. And I just wanted to finish out with this, Matt. I think we can go into more detail maybe of any of the parts of the presentation that I've passed more quickly, like how we do our activities or what we're doing concretely. But this is something that I've thought, as I was the last speaker, that I could finish off with. And it's a little story from when I was in Japan last year. After I got married, I came back from my honeymoon, and the day or the week after, I went to Japan with a friend that Matt also knows, Paco Suarez, from Spain. And in Japan, in the conference, there was an American speaker, actually, Eric Mayer from Generation Atomic, who I know that you have a lot of relationship with, that said that nuclear energy was close to the closest thing he had seen to magic. And this was very interesting for me. And it brought me actually back to different moments in my career. So when I was in school, I actually got very interested in radiation and found this magic in radiation. So I designed a cloud chamber when I was in school and used it to see the different radiations. And also, it brought me back to when we do our nuclear power plants visits. This picture is actually from the Cofrentes MPP, which is a nuclear power plant in Spain. And we actually do visits of the power plants with Jóvenes Nucleares. And I remember a moment when we were standing there on top of the reactor, and they were telling us that this reactor was enough to feed about 50% of the region of homes that we were in. And I was just thinking that this is magical, that just below me in 20 meters of space or 30 meters of space, there was enough energy being generated to feed the whole of one of the provinces of Spain. So I found this pretty magical. And yeah, this is just a reference to the electricity production that nuclear occupies per space. So nuclear is more than 10 times as efficient in space as solar thermal and solar photovoltaic, and nearly 3 times as efficient as wind energy. So here, this is my last slide, and I would just like to finish off with this. There was also a speaker in Japan who said who started with this concept of beautiful nuclear. So he has a free book here that you can access in this link. And just this quote from Christy Gogan: "Nuclear is beautiful because its tiny land use and life cycle footprint protects nature and delivers civilization scale, abundant, clean energy." So thank you very much. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'm here to help.
Yes, so I just want to end this by thanking all of our speakers. So just thank you for attending. This will be posted to YouTube, so if you have colleagues, we can share that after. And as you can see here, even though we're from different parts of the world, we have common issues here. We have common commonalities. So A lot of us will be coming together for COP27, 8. I don't even know which one it is now.
28.
28. Yeah, we'll be coming together to advocate for nuclear on the global perspective. But even when I meet other people from different parts of the world, we just have the same story. We have the same issues. So yeah, so thank you all for joining. I know we are probably out of time for questions here. So I saw some people were answering them in the chat here. That's amazing. Sarah, I think the one we didn't answer was yours. So if you wanted to answer that quickly, so I'll read it. You mentioned thinking differently as a challenge to decarbonization. Could you offer insights into some methods or efforts regarding the workforce culture change that could be more supportive of decarbonization and sustainability efforts?
So if I'm understanding the question, I think there's a lot of things that the industry is doing. For example, I know the industry is working together to make certification training more attractive and accessible to a diverse population by looking at reducing the duration of that training. While without compromising nuclear safety standards. So bringing different people who might not have gone through that training before into the industry. Because currently we have, I think it's under a quarter of the nuclear workforce is female. So looking at expanding there. Indigenous partnerships and learning is a huge area of opportunity, and one that the industry is really working closely with. The NWMO, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, I would say being best in class in terms of that engagement, including their Indigenous knowledge policy. I think there's a lot of work being done around building social license around the use of medical isotopes, in which Canada is a global leader in harvesting and developing those isotopes. And I mean, I'm sure that there are lots of other things going on, but those would be a few examples I could share, and welcome any others, Matthew, that you might offer.
Perfect. Well, I know we're over time here, so I won't delay anyone else from getting to their next meeting. So again, thank you all for joining. Thank you to all of our speakers. I hope this was interesting. And like I said, so many commonalities. We're all fighting to get to a better world. So yeah, lots of stuff in common regardless of where you're from. So hope this was good. And like I said, I'm going to post it to the NAYGN YouTube page after, so feel free to share it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.